comes in a different category. It's still under the category of cannabis expertise, but I want to cover the fact that I study plant-based electrical elements. Because when you start studying plant-based electrical elements, you begin to understand that there is a common nature with everything that we're talking about, especially when we get into these topics in regards to herb. That's really, really big in the nature of avoiding overconsumption incidences. That is what we're really going to cover probably midway in regards to microdosing. On the angle of food, you want to avoid overconsumption of anything, because anything to an extreme eventually produces a negative. So because of that, I'm not so sure how all of our viewers do or do not interact with cannabis or not. But what we're going to do is we're going to go with the most highlighted one, which would be smoking. We're going to start with smoking, then we're going to work our way into extractions. After that, we'll cover how to actually cook with it. We'll cover a few angles on how to extract. And then after that, we will highlight in between those areas terpenes. What is the importance of that? What does that really mean? And I'm just going to break everything down to help you guys understand that you don't need to be a world-renowned or extreme cannabis connoisseur in certain natures. Chefs are really good at this stuff. Reason why chefs are really good at this stuff, because if you care about your client or if you care about the event, you're going to want the highest quality value to the food. By supplying the highest quality value, once you start placing that into food science, you start talking about the nutrients. If something is voided of nutrients, then it is just there. The body does not have the opportunity to metabolize. So real quick, covering what is metabolization. When you metabolize, it talks to your hormones, including stress. Stress is even a hormone, so we'll cover that. Stress being a hormone, that's information. That information now tells the cell to open up and then bring in fresh nutrients so it can metabolize the process. That's literally what metabolization is. It's processing of information. And where am I coming from with that information? Plant-based information. The most important thing to remember is plants run everything. It doesn't matter how long you think we've been on Earth, we'll just cover the basics. Earth is 4.5 billion years old. Give or take, whoever wants to argue that. Literally a billion years after Earth came into play, plants showed up. So plants are 3.5 billion years old. Everything that we do comes from an organic plant-based electrical element. And what I mean when I say the word electrical, and this is where we start getting into the chemicals of it all. And this is why we have these fun topics like talking about marijuana, because marijuana is an electrical plant-based element, just like zucchini and basil. The only difference is if you were to heat up zucchini and basil and start the decarboxylation, then nothing releases as far as a psychoactive effect. Marijuana does. So in the nature of understanding that, we're just going to go back into understanding some of the smoking aspects. That's some of the easiest forms. You see it all the time on TV and so on. So when it comes to smoking, you have something after smoking, and this is on the nutritional side, called a reactive oxygen species. Anybody who really wants to understand this, get ready to write down a lot of acronyms. Yes, we know CBD. Yes, we know THC. But these particular acronyms are going to assist you in understanding a new avenue in how to approach this in the nature of nutrition, because that's basically what this is all about. How to incorporate nutrition in the level of plant-based to create a stronger relationship with plants. And that's basically what's going to happen when we enjoy marijuana. So if you hear me speak of the word material, that is what I'm talking about. When I say material, I'm talking about marijuana. So basically a reactive oxygen species, or better known as ROS. Those are derivatives of oxygen that can be produced after you actually smoke. And the effects happen in many different ways of the body. They are free radical derivatives of oxygen that, you know, can come from this plant when igniting it on fire. We're talking about simple form of organic chemistry, or even if you would like to talk about plant-based alchemy. We are now turning this solid flour by adding fire into a combustible gas that turns into a variety of chemicals that, once enters into the body, immediately goes into the bloodstream, goes right to the brain, and the brain begins to process this in its psychoactive nature, going to this portion of your forehead. And this is called your prefrontal cortex. It is a single tasking thinking machine. This is why sometimes us as adults, we tend to get headaches or a little frustrated at the end of the day, because we're doing a lot of multitasking. Some folks want to take a hit after work. Some folks want to take a hit after a stressful moment. That in a nature allows you to go back to a single tasking thinking machine. Another portion of the brain that it goes to is something called the amygdala. That is where all your feelings and emotions are. So this is very important, and where I link this up as a chef is I utilize rosemary a lot, and rosemary goes to the exact same location in the amygdala, because the amygdala is holding cannabinoids. That's the only way we get that combination. They'll have the psychoactive THC, and we'll talk about what type of THC that is, because that's actually a different form than what it is in its raw state as a flower. So this is how all this stuff is connected. It's all connected chemically. So we'll touch on rosemary, even if we do it at another point in time, maybe not today. But either way, when it comes to understanding some of these oxidative stress that can come from smoking, it's a result of the inflammatory process of the smoke. It can damage tissues inside of the lung and so on. A simple tip, and then we move on. Consume the polar opposite, antioxidants. Okay, it's very, very important to consume the antioxidants, because if you let this go, all the smokers who just smoke and they don't detox a smoking process, a carbon process that's going into the lungs, and the lungs are only supposed to consume a gas called oxygen. Yes, we consume all these other gases, and, you know, blessings to the body that it can do all of this and adapt and move forward. But if you continue to do this and you don't address your regular everyday smoke consumption, you'll get closer to developing a decellularized DNA process. It's going to affect healthy DNA. That's literally what builds up in your body over the time of these free radical derivatives that come from the ROS. So, like I said, the best way to change, and this is another acronym, it's called MSC, which is marijuana smoke condensing. You want to make sure that when the body is condensing this smoke and dispersing the THC, you have a plant-based counteractive, and that would be your antioxidant. So you can cover that with berries. More importantly, for my avenue, I like to cover it in the nature of all of your herbs. And I'm not talking about marijuana at this point. I'm talking about rosemary, thyme, oregano, sage. All of these are antioxidants. And these antioxidants are very, very important, because an antioxidant is literally going to stop the oxidation of this process happening inside. That's why it's an antioxidant. So we'll take that and combine that with 2 other elements, and now we start going into coating. And that's what I do as a private chef for my clients who have any form of health issues or just want to be at their best as a human. I understand coating. So we're going to cover coating real quick, and then we move on to another aspect of the marijuana. So when you're a chef and you understand coating, you can feed certain portions of the brain that actually assist with the neurological receptors, which is great cognitive nutrition. What I mean by that is you supply a sulfur family, a B family, and an antioxidant family. You combine all 3 of those together, you're now feeding a very scientific word called mitochondria. And that just might be known as, something that reminds you of biology class, but this is the second DNA circle inside of every human cell. This is outside of the DNA chain inside of the nucleus. Once you start understanding these things, once you start doing a deep dive into these 2 sectors of one cell, you now realize, wow, I can assist people with medical marijuana by doing proper dosing of THC. I can assist people with just having a positive dispensary, regardless whether it's marijuana or not, by giving them a well-dosed edible. So the coating is very, very important. I'd have to say that, that is what allows microdosing to take place. In regards to microdosing, covering that real quick, let's just establish a very important mantra for all the newbies and all those that may have taken a fall down the dark rabbit hole of consuming way too much edibles. It's a stuck process that until the body processes it through the body, you're going to be in that moment. So this is a very simple mantra. Start low and go slow. Meaning, and remember, it's start low, meaning that you take a low dosage, meaning that if it's a brownie, you take a quarter of the brownie. I don't care if you wanted to hurry up. This isn't, you don't rush plants. You don't want to rush plants. They have, like I said, they've been around for 3.5 billion years. They're going to whop you. They're going to take you for a ride, and it's definitely going to have a problem. So you start low, go slow, and that's a low dose. You wait about 2 hours before dosing, and then you observe the effects of the experience. For those that really want to do a deep dive into how this is going to affect you, I would recommend tracking it with a journal and tracking your dosing. This allows you to later on have a better prediction of the future adventure and, empowering yourself with the knowledge of your individual experience and need, because that's what this is. Even though it's a communal plant, a lot of us, or typically all of us, will chemically experience marijuana differently, because every human is like a zebra stripe. We are all different chemically, regardless of how much we may act the same in certain characteristics and hair color and skin color and so on. So that's just a really good thing to remember. When we're talking about extractions, I have to cover a really important portion of extractions. It comes down to your oils, your hashes, your the nature of how you condense herb. And a lot of the time you'll find that back in the day, maybe, I don't know, 2017, some of the herb was actually not where, people wanted to enjoy it. It was still being given a bad commentary. There were a few actions of states that had medical and recreational marijuana. They wouldn't allow you to sell condensed herb. So, it's it's a value of understanding how do you go about, you know, breaking down your flours, or breaking down your dissolvent to making, you know, your hashes, to making your oils. Um, we'll just cover a really important one. This was like early 2000s, and you know, it's always been volatile because a lot of it isn't legal in a lot of states. But you know, around 2003, there was a Canadian gentleman by the name of Rick Simmons that, you know, claimed to cure his own skin cancer with cannabis, and it brought a lot of attention to the world. And he has his own stated name, which is RSO, which is a Rick Simmons oil. He actually created it himself. It's done with safe food grade ethanol. Ethanol might trigger a lot of people's thought to think about gasoline, and that's absolutely correct. When it comes to ethanol, that's exactly where these two are stemming from. They are both plant-based. Ethanol is coming from a plant process, mainly from your dense agricultural goods, which would be corn, which would be barley, certain other grain flours. That's what's making ethanol. So please don't think that this is, you know, coming from the gasoline synthetic side first. This is organic chemistry first before anything else. So, you know, in the nature of cannabis extractions, there are two popular types. The cannabis extractions, you know, they come as one is an alcohol solvent, and that is a isopropyl alcohol. I personally, you know, there it's I guess to preference. I'm always going to promote what has the strongest form of nutritional intake. So I would recommend using isopropyl alcohol to clean your utensils and, you know, glass pipes if you're going to, you know, do that. That breaks down the resin. But at the same time, that's the science of it. If it breaks down the resin, then it can extract the information from the plant easily. But what's left behind is a very strong, pungent taste of that alcohol solvent. And you would need both the technology and an acquired level of practice to make sure that you vacuum out that remnants taste, because it's really not tasty at all. And when we're talking about an extraction and then putting it into an edibles and consuming it into food, the end result along the way is that it should be tasty. So that's one of the things that, you know, to keep in mind. And then in addition to that, we have the ethanol extraction. Now, it may not always be, you know, the best route, but your ethanol can actually go to a colder state. And that's what we really want when it comes to cold extractions. There's warm extractions and there's cold extractions to acquire the highest level of nutrients, to acquire the highest level of phytoterpenes, and the reason why I say phytoterpenes, because everything is phyto. Phyto means plant. This is why we have phytonutrients. This is why we have phytocannabinoids. So saying phytoterpenes is just as simple as saying terpenes, but I want to come from it from a chef's point of view, that terpenes are as simple as tearing basil, rubbing cilantro in your hands, or scratching the rind of a lemon. When you get that scent, when you get that smell, those are terpenes. It's the same terpenes that you have in cannabinoids for cannabis. This is why your flowers smell amazing, because they are holding those terpenes. We'll jump into that a little bit more, but we're, you know, just to cover where and how are you getting the highest level the most effective level, it will come from your ethanol extractions. And for a while, there have been, like I said, the concentrates, they got a bad name, back in the day. A lot of places didn't want to sell them because of how strong they were and how concerned people, I guess, in the higher ups of that state or states, they didn't want people overdosing themselves. You can have a really, really crazy experience by condensing. This is almost like a balsamic vinaigrette, or a demi-glaze. You have to make sure you understand what to do with these elements once you condense them, because they're extremely pungent. They were pungent before, but now you've condensed the flavor even more. And when you take the word flavor, put it into marijuana and say concentrates, the flavor is now a stronger dose of THC.
Hey, Chef Nikko. Question
Yes.
for you. This is Joe Hager. First and foremost, thanks so much for coming on. This what you've given us so far is definitely a higher level than I think any of us could ever give, and we're certainly appreciative of having you on today. Question is, as far as the marketplace goes right now, with products in dispensaries specifically, would you say that the majority of them are derived from ethanol or the isopropyl extract?
Well, that's a really awesome question. For my point of view, what is the safest? And we'll cover that real quick. It would be the ethanol.
Okay.
Why? Because it's literally the least hazardous compound to change the value of your herb. And while you're extracting, you don't really have to worry about safety. Like I said before, there's a lot of hazardous byproducts from isopropyl. There's a lot, and that's where you can definitely say, whether you're into food science or chemistry or not, if there's a hazardous byproduct, it's going to affect your THC, because we're all talking about it on a chemical level. So
Great.
that's where that gets pretty important.
Thank you for answering. And also, we'll just remind our audience, it's not every day we have someone like Chef Nikko here. So we do encourage people to speak up. If you have questions throughout the wonderful explanations, please feel free to just speak up.
Yeah, jump on in. My goal as a chef is to put the common back into the sense. And as a chef, my immediate goal is to put culture back into agriculture, because that is the original culture for all human beings. I'm not saying you have to be a vegan. I'm not saying you have to be a vegetarian, but I doggone guarantee you that steak sat down the grass. It didn't sit down to, a porterhouse. All animals consume plant-based, and we now, through the chain of consumption, consume those plant-based elements as well. So meat eaters, guess what? You're vegetarians by a food science standpoint. So at the end of the day, you just want to understand that, yes, going back to terpenes are all about plant-based. So, when it comes to extractions, we want to make sure what is the least hazardous. And when we're talking about extractions, there are a few that, can actually be extremely hazardous to extract. Some of those would be butane hash oil, propane hash oil, butane hash oil is better known as BHO. Excuse me, propane hash oil is better known as PHO. Then you have CO2 extractions. Then you have tinctures. Then you have hash. And then at the end of the day, you have good old-fashioned cannabis flowers. So basically, the butane, the propane, and the CO2, these gases can and will always be on a higher hazardous scale to extract, because they're flammable friendly. Like anything else that's flammable, yes, we're going to do the best that we can to make sure that our environment is safe and so on. But at the end of the day, even static electricity in the air has been known to ignite anything, including just utilizing your phone. Your phone can create static electricity within the microdust organisms in the air. This is why, if you were to look at your gas station pump, they literally warn you not to use your cell phone while pumping your gas, along with shutting your car off, because these are all things that did happen. Doesn't mean it's going to happen, but if it did happen, they got to put it down. They have to warn the consumer that it's in your best interest to just let everything be as safe as possible when it comes to anything that could explode. I guess the easiest form for people to just grab right now and utilize right now can be butane, can be propane, or CO2. Not everybody has the ability to grab the ethanol, and you may have to do your research on that. So just covering, how to make edibles with any cannabis product. When it comes to already having the hash oil, whether it's from butane or propane, whether you already have the RSO, which is the Rick Simmons oil, which is, by the way, is like a super thick molasses process that you put on topically, or you would take orally underneath the tongue. I have heard of people cooking with that. As a chef, I have cooked with it. You just have to understand your flavor profiles with all of these, because some of them are going to hold a very strong earth flavor. And if you don't know how to counterbalance that, it will pop out. And that's what kind of throws people off with a lot of edibles. Depending on the person or the company that is doing the edibles, you will find that there is a very strong earth flavor of that flower or that extraction. In addition to that, there's three major components to basic steps that would allow all edible infusion methods to come together. Some of those would actually, the start of it would be the decarboxylation, or for those that just need to shorten that, decarbing. This is literally the most important step. Why is it the most important step? Because THC, if I'm holding up, let me see, I got a blueberry here. If this is a blueberry, okay, so let's say this blueberry is a flower. If I am, let's see, what is the difference between ethanol and Everclear? Okay, good call. All right, I'll go back to the bud conversation in a minute. The difference between ethanol and Everclear is that ethanol, as stated before, comes from a plant-based derivative, mainly corn or barley. In nature of the cold extraction, ethanol is a fermentation, and it's used in almost everyday products. A lot of people don't realize that there are multiple foods and drinks that have ethanol in it, because ethanol basically is used to kickstart fermentation. So any foods that you may acquire, or any drinks that have a flavor, because remember, these extractions are ancient in the food industry. There might have been, something done for marijuana industry recently, but ethanol has been used in the food industry. The FDA approves this for quite a long time, because ethanol extracts natural flavors, and that allows them to place that into foods and beverages without actually having the product of that flavor, meaning that you can do an extraction of blueberry without having the beverage be a bluish or purple color, but the flavor would be blueberry, because through organic chemistry and into mass production synthetic chemistry, you are now taking ethanol to extract this flavor, and then you put it in towards the end of the batch, which allows certain clear looking drinks to actually have the flavor of pomegranate and blueberry. Do you lose a lot of the nutritional value along the way? Absolutely, because the further you go away, the further you extract some of that ancient alchemy that would make a plant release its chemicals, the more you separate that on a chemical level, turning it from alchemy to organic chemistry to synthetic chemistry. Like eventually it gets so far apart that yes, it can be voided completely of nutrients. So Everclear is a very strong alcohol. I myself has actually extracted, when I was younger, I extracted quite a bit with Everclear. I do a lot of my flambeing with Everclear. It's a real, you know, not for the flavor, just for the show, because Everclear is a very strong alcohol. So also derived from corn. So yes, both of them do hold, and that's the beauty of it, both of them hold the same plant-based element. So yes, most ethanol that we drink is the same ethanol used as a blend in gasoline as well. They're pretty much the same. However, you know, the overall potency and quality, it's much different when it comes to fuel ethanol. It might not score as high as the ethanol used as a beverage, which makes sense because the only reason why we're using the ethanol in our gasoline is because ethanol, by natural standpoint, is used to oxygenate what it's extracting, to bring more value into it with the nature of oxygen. So in the nature of a car, that just allows fuel to burn more efficiently. That helps for production of cleaner emissions, which is actually quite sustainable for the environment. So I know I did a deep dive on that, but really awesome question. Just back to the blueberry and the actual flower. If I were to just promote this as a marijuana flower, this blueberry here, when it comes to decarboxylation or decarbing, this right here is considered THCA, which is a non-psychoactive element. So in order to actually turn this THCA into a psychoactive element, you have to go through a process that converts the THCA into delta-9 THC. Anytime you get high, good people, remember it is delta-9 THC that's doing it. Anybody who doesn't want to smoke, that just wants to enjoy, like this blueberry, a superfood plant, you can literally just eat it. That's it. You're not going to get anything else from the plant but superfood nutrition. You're also going to get vitamin A, which is very important for how terpenes are supported. Vitamin A is also a great form of beta carotene as well. And these carotenoids is what allows some of these orange, yellow, amber, and red hairs to show up on your flowers. These are all chemical procedures that take place in plant-based life. And this is what allows the terpenes to actually, you know, go into play and, you know, be a strong value of quality for your extraction. So time and temperature during decarbing is literally the most important, because if you don't understand your time and your temperature, and you know, we'll cover that going into the weeks. If you don't understand that, you're going to lose quality. If your temperature is too high, or you are decarbing too long, you risk boiling off the active THC, which is delta-9. And when you're a person who enjoys an edible and you're at home, if it happens, you make a mistake, whatever. But if this is a business and we're all here to understand how we can better our capitalistic ways of using marijuana, this material, if it's not captured at its right point, now you're losing an audience because you're giving a shady, not really shady, but you're giving a low grade product. And to marijuana connoisseurs that enjoy edibles, or those who have not really experienced the enjoyment of edibles, it could change their experience drastically. So once you understand that, you know, there's many methods with you know, varying slight variations to how you do decarboxylation. But that will determine, you know, based on your techniques. The next step after that would be infusions, as that is directly applied to edibles. Once you have activated by decarbing and made delta 9 THC, now infusing this process is a very important compound to, you know, getting the final edible product. And, you know, this can be done with multiple cannabinoids, you know, THC, CBD, this is where your terpenes come into play, and so on. A lot of people tend, including myself, I enjoy using a healthy fat soluble, particularly coconut oil or olive oil. Let's just cover this real quick. There are 3 healthy fats, people: coconut oil, olive oil, and grass-fed butter. Please do yourself a favor when infusion, stick with coconut oil, olive oil, and grass-fed butter. Why? Because these fats are healthy for the brain. And at the end of the day, we also want to give a good round of applause to a healthy cognitive nutritional state for all human beings. Everything starts in the brain. 90% of everything is conducted by thought in the brain. So we want to support that. By using your coconut oil or your butter, your grass-fed butter or your olive oil, it will make your infusion method ideal for creating a cannabis, let's say, delivery vehicle that, you know, your body can use and metabolize more easily, because the infusion gets trapped in the fat solubles. And when the fat solubles are loaded with nutrition and are designed to assist with healthy brain function, like those 3 healthy fats, the oil works out perfect. You know, at that point, you know, that cooking oil can then be used as a, you know, a regular non-infused fat, and that, there you go. You put that in your recipe. You use a cannabis oil with a non, you know, cannabis oil. You have to adjust that when you're making your recipe. That is microdosing. Let's stress that point. If you were to just use a brownie batch and you use all the oil recommendation with your cannabis butter or your coconut oil, I've done some recipes with olive oil for brownies that does work well. Either fat, if you're doing all of it, if it calls for a 1/4 cup of oil and you do all of that as a THC oil, you have to put a warning sign for not only yourself but others, or you have to be very experienced in the consumptionary value of cannabis. Once again, microdosing is very important, and it starts with the manufacturer of the edible, whether it's a home manufacturer or a business manufacturer in a factory or a company. The microdosing of that is very important. What I would recommend if you're just starting out, I would do half and half. So I would take a 1/4 cup of that oil, split that down in half, and do a regular butter, and then do the other half of that 1/4 cup of oil as an infused butter. This is going to lower your THC intake for the batch. Some people like, oh, that's nonsense, I want a super high batch, and that's fine. And that means that you have to now take a little bite of that brownie, because now your dosing increases as you consume a larger amount of that. So that's really where your infusions would come into play. And then your third and final step that, you know, it's not always going to be required in edible infusion, but it's definitely a mandatory for your near final recipe, and that's straining. Extremely important when infusing a cooking oil like a butter or a coconut oil. The straining removes the bulk plant matter and other undesired, you know, remnants of cannabis products. It minimizes the earthy cannabis flavor and the green color in your infused oil. Say you're making an almond cookie. If you don't strain this properly, your almond cookie may come out slight tinged green and with this stronger earthy taste, and it just being a fun almond cookie with its nice offset, you know, white color, and then it has a nice THC value to it. The way you acquire that is by straining. One of the most, you know, one of the most complete ways to do straining is to go about multiple sieve process. You don't just want to strain it one time. You probably want to strain it about 3 or 5 times to make sure that all of that's out. But in regards to straining, there's quite a few methods. You definitely want to look that up and understand that. So when it comes to how do you microdose and make sure that you are in a safe avenue of that, you definitely want to go about understanding your product. You always want to use a high quality product. By using a high quality product, this allows you to make the statement less is more. You don't have to worry about putting a whole batch of something because you know that it's actually going to provide you with what you need. Just going into the, I guess, decarbing of your oils, you always want to understand your temperature science. And that would basically mean that you have to, if you're doing this in an oven, you want to make sure that your oils are in a 200-degree Fahrenheit oven for maximum 20 minutes. And remember, none of this is set in stone because we're always dealing with a element that always protects itself to other elements like fire, like wind and water. And this is what plants have done before we showed up. We came onto Earth about a million and some change, a few million years ago, let's put it that way. So we're nowhere near in the time frame of plants. So they have built up a defense not only towards the environment, but towards us. So when it comes to these extractions, they're going to build that defense or already have it built into them as well. You want to look at a lot of your extraction temperatures similar to steeping green tea. And this is a range. Your quality green tea is steeped between 175 to 190. The boiling point temperature is 212 degrees. Yes, boiling sounds like it's fun and it's doing something, but boiling creates vapor, and vapor is not water. Vapor is when water is no longer stable. And as a chef, these are simple heat infusions. There's 2 different types. There's hot and there's cold infusions. So as a chef, you definitely want to understand your heated infusions. You could lose a lot of your nutrients, a lot of your terpenes, a lot of your phytonutrients because they're delicate. These chemicals do not do well under unstable heat. So remember that the boiling temperature of water is 212, and 212 registers an unstable heat for a lot of liquids. This is why you have the extractions done with, legal marketed gases like butane, like propane, but there are still synthetic solvents that are always going to leave a flavor that you have to have other technology or knowledge to remove that flavor after you've done decarbing the material. And once again, remember when I say material, I'm talking about marijuana. So to avoid all of this heating process, this is how we spin right back around to the ethanol. That allows you to do cold fusion. Cold fusion will once again trap the highest levels of nutrients, and throughout the passage of time, cold fusion with ethanol has allowed some very important technology to come about. One of them is Etho4. This is a closed, this Etho4 is a closed loop. The company that created it is not going to let it out. But basically what they do is they rely on cryo temperature. They're going way below zero to produce an extraction process that takes about 8 hours, but you freeze the flour. Then you freeze the ethanol. And at a certain cryo temperature, within a deep freezer, you add the ethanol to the flour, which allows maximum extraction. And when done with the Etho 4 method, they use negative pressure to evaluate and transfer the emulsion from stage to stage. Basically, that would operate by spraying ethanol on top of the material and soaking it with freezing ethanol. That is an operating cryo temperature system. Not everybody has that. This technology, like I said, is a closed loop. So some of these top level extractors, they're definitely keeping that secret to themselves. As a chef, I completely understand when it comes to hot and cold infusions, how to keep a secret to yourself.
Chef Nikko,
oh, Joe, Jeff, you're on there. Go ahead, Joe.
Chef Nikko,
I
was
got
going
about
to ask.
4 or 5 minutes, guys.
Gotcha.
Okay, I was going to ask, how old is that process that you just spoke of currently?
Let's say that process is something that I would say it's about 3 years in the making. I would say after 2017, when concentrates went up on the stock market another 50 cents, that's when you started having a lot of technology come into play and saying, yeah, well, we know how to do some game-changing stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, very interesting. Thank you.
Yeah, that's you want to look at the Etho 4 as, you know, an ethanol technology that, you know, it's only a game player, but this one is coming up as like the team captain of those game players, because there's a lot more technologies. That's why, you know, you may not be able to get your hand on it. What is the company?
Well, I tell you what, Chef Nikko, with the remaining minutes, can you please, you've been such a wonderful guest. Me personally, I learned so much today, and I look forward to deep diving myself into some personal research on Etho 4, as well as cold fusion. And my gosh, again, we really, really appreciate you coming on. We hope to have you again in the future. Please tell us where we can find you online, any of your channels that we might be able to follow you at, and any other information that we might need to know to follow you in your career.
Absolutely. Yeah, I know it. There's just not enough time to get into all this good high stuff.
Never.
I love these plant-based elements. So, okay, anybody who is interested in understanding more about me, 2 of my social media handles, you can follow me at chef.nikko on Instagram. In regards to the nutritional aspect of what I promote, you can follow me on Instagram at nutritionfit44. That will definitely give you a good understanding of what I'm doing. On top of that, my website is www.pvtchefnikko.com. Once again, pvtchefnikko.com. PVT stands for private, so just remember the abbreviation. And then once again, pvtchefnikko.com.
Chef Nikko, one thing I think you might be able to do for those that are on live with us is actually type that website into the chat for everyone to copy before they leave, and then put your Twitter handle and your Instagram handle and everything there on that chat. So everybody that's on live with us tonight, feel free to copy that information. And you know, we definitely would like to have you come back next time, and maybe we can recontinue some of this next week on a shorter platform, and not just the entire show, but maybe we can continue you know, having you on as a guest for 5 or 10 minutes and we could focus on a little bit of an aspect of food-based attributes to the show every week, and we can make that a little bit of a staple for 5 to 10 minutes there. So if you're able to come on every week, we'll be back on here next week, Wednesday, 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific. And we thank you for your time. And this is Cannabis Pitch Live. Reggie, I'll turn it over to you.
Hey, Chef Nikko, exceptional. I learned so much today. I know everyone else that is on today with us and that looks at this once we record it and put it out there to the public. We appreciate you, and we definitely will get you an hour again next month. We'd love to come every week and have a little bit to say, but you have so much valuable information that is imperative that we get you back on, and we'll schedule you according to what your schedule on a Wednesday, sometime in the month of July. We appreciate you. Much love, great information. Thanks to everybody that's joined us. Peace, love, and happiness. We're Cannabis Pitch Live, athletes in cannabis. We're out. Have a great day, guys. Be safe, everyone.
Take care. Enjoy the day. Bye now.